Whenever we think of languages, we think of the different form humans, since time immemorial, have codified ways to communicate with each other. Since we are a societal species, we need even more than others to communicate our needs to our similars. And with the evolution of the structure of society itself and our needs, language evolved with it. Hello, so long time no see. So in this video I was thinking of doing something peculiar and go over the origin of language and some forms of structure and how it influences the way we experience and consume media, by talking about Sumerian bowls, Napoleon, Nutella and Yugioh. There are many myths on the origin of language. In Hinduism, Vak, or Vacha, is a personification of language. Legendarily, the various languages that are present in the world were born with a Christian god. Just as Zeus and the fire brought to humans by Prometheus, who was then punished, he disliked the idea of humans trying to get on their level, so they divided the people by languages, creating discord between them and halting their plans. Similarly, in Greek myth, Hermes gave different nations different languages, creating discord. There is even like the one of the Wazania, which are part of the Bantu from East Africa, where during a famine, everyone kind of went insane, and after wandering to many different places in the world, they just started speaking different languages because they were insane. I don't know. There are even ones from South America, in specific one with a man named Cox and Shoki Quetzal, I think, which after surviving by floating on a piece of bark, found themselves on land, where a dove taught their children different languages. Like, it's interesting stuff. In actuality, as we will discuss later, differences in language derive more from different environments in which they were created. But I still think that the way people from different times and places use myths and stories to reason with what happens around them, which is a thing we still do to this day, is truly a fascinating thing. One is considered the origin of one of the most ancient known written systems of language, which is the Sumerian cuneiform, was developed almost 5,500 years ago in Mesopotamia, the land between the two rivers, the center of the earth, the Fertile Crescent, the beautiful, that place. Short in an extremely eventful set of events and socio-cultural advancements, it is thought that a basic form of pre-writing script formed from the need of cataloging things. So at first they used special tokens that represented cattle or whatever, and these will be put inside seals called bulle, which is like bowls. Be careful when researching to add the word Sumerian bulle or something about it, because if you search bulle by themselves you get really graphic images of blisters. Anyway, these bulle are thought to have been used for counting cattle when herding, as I said, so adding for example a token for each sheep, or a different one for each pig, or even grains, anything. And the bulle would contain, these tokens, will also have a design to showcase what it is inside. And later on, by association, the symbol will start to represent the concept of a thing inside. And then onwards, the symbol by itself will start to evolve. And so the symbol will start just meaning a sound, for example, By quoting Walter J. Ong,
the economic setting of such pre-chirographic use of tokens could help associate them with writing, for the first cuneiform script, from the same region as the bulle, whatever its exact antecedents, served mostly workaday economic and administrative purposes in urban societies. Urbanization provided the incentive to develop record-keeping. Using writing for imaginative creations, as spoken words have been used in tales of lyric, that is, using writing to produce literature in the most specific sense of this term, comes quite late in the history of script. Pictures can serve as aide-memoire, or they can be equipped with a code enabling them to represent more or less exactly specific words in various grammatical relation to each other. Chinese character writing is still today basically made up of pictures, but pictures stylized and codified in intricate ways which make it certainly the most complex writing system the world has ever known.
That's mostly it. I'll add you some neat related videos in the description on the topics I'll discuss, and also my sources, which are very nice, to check them out. I usually did not put a lot of them in the description in all videos, because for a lot of them I actually used Italian sources. So I didn't know if people were interested in them, but from now on I'll try to put them as most as possible, because, you know, you have to be clear with your sources, otherwise it seems like you're like inventing things, right? So put your sources in your videos if you do them, and let's go on. A common factoid that is presented in relation to language differences is that the Inuit and Yupik languages have around 40 to 50 words dedicated to describing snow-related things, with terms describing snow that could be used to make water and others. But there are other cultures and languages with many snow-related names. They would be the ones of the Sami, which have around 180, and the Scottish, which has 420, which is a lot. When thinking about how this comes to be, it's easy to figure out that language, being a tool to describe things we need to communicate, as said earlier, adapts to what people need to discuss or convey. So naturally, countries with a different kinds of environments or customs will develop different kinds of terms. Famous examples to make the point easy to get are words that don't have a lot of direct translations in other languages that mean very specific things. Unsurprisingly, Italy and Spain have different food and relaxation related specific words, like the Italian abbiocco, which is used to refer to the drowsiness but comes after a big meal, or the Spanish sobremesa, which is used to refer to when you just hang out at the table when you've finished eating. Both of these languages also include very specific kinds of swear words that have the distinction of insulting the Christian God, the Christian church organization, or anything related, which probably derive from the closeness to various degrees of what in Italian is referred to as temporal power, which indicates when the Christian church not only had power in the realm of the spiritual, but also political, having lands, armies and other things, and suppressing anything that went against it with tremendous force. Relatedly, Georgian has a word which is, and I won't do that thing that YouTubers usually do, which is mispronouncing words and then say whatever, because every language matters. So I'll put some pronunciations from Google Translate or anything related. But if my version is correct, I'll just keep that, which is shimomejamo, which is used to refer to when someone feels full but keeps eating anyway. German has a couple neat ones as well, with
verschlimmbessern,
which is referred to when someone tries to fix a problem only to make it worse, or
Treppenwitz,
which instead is for when you think of a clever comeback way after the discussion it would have made sense in. All these neat things you can find about language are to get to the next point. Reinstating that language is a tool that we use to convey our necessities and thoughts. It has to be considered that, like the Richard Dawkins kind of meme, which is like the cultural gene we leave behind, language influences how we think of certain concepts. As a basic example of this, in a video I've linked in the sources, please check them out, there are talks about how German and Spanish use different genders to refer to different items, having German using female-related terms for bridges, for example, while Spanish use male-related ones. And by extension, they also use male or female-related descriptors for them. For an example, specifically for English speakers, there is an interesting book called Gatsby, with a D, that is interestingly written without the use of the letter E, which is the most prominent in the English language. So to refer to even the simplest of activities, places, etc., the author had to go through esoteric leaps around what they want to say, which kind of reflects the feeling when you try to speak in a language that isn't your own and you are not finding the corresponding term for the word you're thinking, or have you just forgotten it. So you just have to find new ways around it, and try to explain what you're trying to say. Okay, so to connect this to games, anime, manga and whatever, which is what some of you are here for, Obviously, whenever the discourse of language is involved, a lot of topics can come to mind, as many times the wild differences in languages can and have had an influence on the different language versions of the same product. Of course, there can be intentional ones, like the attempts of English and Italian versions of anime to remove all references to Japan, to make the shows more in line with the other selection of animation present at the time. Or in some cases trying to influence the intentions of original. Like the American Netflix sub with Evangelion that tried to remove declarations of love between men, and they added like a thing that terrorists were like leftists for some reason? I don't know. And just to be unilateral, the Italian Netflix redub of Evangelion was kind of weird as well, and I'll try to make it brief because the Italian anime community already went over and demolished this guy from like Catania to Sondrio, like everyone went for this man. So basically, the redub of Evangelion was given in the hands of a guy that always had hand in the Italian adaptations of Ghibli films, called Gualtiero Carnarsi. From what I've gathered, this guy basically tried to match the structure and timing of Japanese, so to make the lip syncing as close to original as possible.
Si tratta di un'agricoltura ganza.
Which in theory sounds neat, except from the fact that they also added like some weird archaic terminologies. So like 4-year-old children who use antiquated 1600s terminologies, and there is the important discrepancy of structure between Italian and Japanese.
Questa è una circostanza di follia.
So at times it will become comically unintelligible what the characters are saying. And if you don't know Italian, it is difficult to convey how weird it sounds.
Però quanto a te, quanto a quel che non puoi fare che tu, per te qualcosa da poter fare dovrebbe esserci.
That maybe an English correspondent of this is this guy from Yakuza 3, which I'll show in a clip without context, as you'll need to play Yakuza 3 to play. It's good, so yeah, like you should do it.
If I'd known it would have come to this, I'd have killed you when first we met. Nandato.
So like, to make it brief, it sounds extremely weird for some reason. While we're on the topic of Italian adaptations, when translating titles over here, there are generally 4 levels of adaptation I've come to understand. The first one is just to leave the title in the original language, usually for recent films or like big franchise ones, like let's say Avengers Infinity War, you know, big examples. Level 2 is basically the first one, but they add like a sneaky subtitle as if it was like a young adult film, or like change the subtitle it originally has. So like, something like Beetlejuice becomes like Beetlejuice Lo Spiritello Porcello, while Master and Commander The Far Side of the World would become Master and Commander Sfida ai confini del mare. So this is to appease both people who don't like a film title to be translated completely in Italian, but also to appease those people who won't see a film if it doesn't have Italian in it, which is kinda weird. Anyway, level 3 is similar to the second one, but in a different way. So they keep the original title, but it is used as a subtitle. So Get Out wouldn't be called Get Out, it will be called Scappa, Get Out. Or like we have Knives Out, which becomes Cena con delitto, Knives Out. So, as said, this is trying to please everyone, but at the same time is giving more importance to the Italian one, in this case. Level 4 is changing the title completely, and it has like happened less and less recently, as in time it has started to be criticized for being weird. As it kind of ties to the fascist periods of Italy where every instance of every language apart from Italian was banned, so everything has to be translated. Of course it's not that intentionally, but it derives from that. You know. Sometimes they will try to translate the title literally, like Star Wars becoming Guerre Stellari, or Raiders of the Lost Ark becomes I Predatori dell'Arca Perduta. Some will try to make the translation more direct about the contents, like Jaws becoming Lo Squalo, which means just the shark. As probably mascelle sounded weird in Italian, as it also sounds like ascelle, which is armpits. Or even we just spoil the film, you know, we just tell you the ending sometimes. Not in this case, I won't. like says eternal sunshine or spotless mind is just,
Se mi lasci, ti cancello.
which is like, if you leave me, I'll delete you. Sometimes they try to add sexual undertones, like the aforementioned Beetlejuice, which is like the horny spirit. Many times missing the point of a film of trying to bank on sex appeal. Many examples are Field of Dreams, Jacob's Ladder, or Made in Dagenham, and more. Sometimes it kind of makes sense, like the Italian title of Citizen Kane is Quarto Potere, which references the three powers of a state, to which now the fourth power of journalism is added, which is cool, like, it's nice. And it's also interesting references by the Italian name of the network, which is Quinto Potere, fifth power, which in this case references the power of telecommunication. And it's cool, like, it's neat, right? But sometimes there are like weird accidents where a film's literal translation has already a film present with that title. Most famously, the first James Bond film with Sean Connery, Dr. No, was translated in Italian into Agente 007, Licenza di uccidere, as they probably did not expect that it was going to be a series, so they went with the most famous title from the novels for it, so it's License to Kill. Too bad though that it did become a series, so when License to Kill came out, they had to change the title to something else. So they went with 007 Vendetta Privata. One of the weirder cases is when the 1944 film Laura got translated into Vertigine because a film called Laura already existed here. But then, when Vertigo came out, they went with La donna che visse due volte, because Vertigo in Italian is just Vertigine. And these things still happen today, as recently with Rise of the Planet of the Apes, which in Italian was translated into L'alba del pianeta delle scimmie, had an issue when the sequel, Dawn of the Planet of the Apes, was literally the same name. So it was translated into Apes Revolution, Il pianeta delle scimmie. And recently even the Disney film Moana was changed into Oceania in Italy because there was already a famous series dedicated to an Italian porn star called Moana Pozzi, so even the main character's name was changed to Vaiana. Anyway, sorry if I went over this too long, like, I find these kind of things very interesting. On the topic of languages being related to the context in which they develop, one interesting example in video games of this is Xenoblade Chronicles 3, adding specific the English dub of it. Of course, since I have to speak about the world building of the game, spoilers of the narrative will be present. These in specific are things that one can deduce very early in the narrative, but they will be properly explained around chapter 5. So if you want to be sure, play the game till chapter 5, or skip this point. Otherwise, I think that knowing this won't ruin surprises as much as other elements in the narrative. In the world of Xenoblade Chronicles 3, humanity is divided into two sides, eternally locked in war. Kind of like the George Orwell book 1984, weirdly enough, with the life governed by what are called flame clocks, that dictate the length of the life which they have to kill to extend. They are also grown from incubators, already starting looking like teenagers and live up to 10 years to what look like 20-somethings, and then die, kind of. So, in this world, the act of reproducing as we know it is not a thing. Everyone is kind of grown like plants, and everything kind of revolves around the flame clock. So by extension, their language, and in specific their swear words, instead of referring to the act of reproducing, like English language has, they are more related instead to what births or governs their everyday life. So, in this case, since it's the flame clock, it's words related to fire, its ignition or extinguishment.
Didn't account for Kite. I snuffed this up.
Sparking dead weight.
The snuff you on about?
It's not Kavesi. Definitely not Agnian either. The spark is that!
Spark that! Why don't you back off?
The spark! Don't they recognize us?
Do you think we're even just because both sides do some killing? What good's filling up these flickering clocks in our eyes? It'll never replace the friends we've lost. That's why.
Ugh. Spark's alive. Bye, transport. Guess we missed it again.
Oh, bollocks. Think it's easier to take things at face value, you know?
Now, wouldn't that be nice?
Huh? You making fun of me?
All I said was, it would be nice.
Oh, no you don't. You just call me an airhead, you jerk.
This is just... How long are you going to drag this out?
For as long as I sparking need to, until you come clean, Four Eyes.
I can't believe this. Someone shoot me.
It's a very interesting way of a dub to add swear words, having them already be auto-censored and also enhancing the world building at the same time. Like, this dub is very good, like, we didn't have to go this far from it, so it's A+. Direction and order are things that may not be on our minds constantly, but they are an intrinsic part of our lives and world. Whenever we turn a key, tighten a screw, pull a door, or read, there is a preconceived or telegraphed order in which it is done. Certain written languages, within their structure and rules, have a reading order in mind. So while languages like Italian or German write from left to right horizontally, others like Arabic or Urdu write right to left, horizontally, mind you. There are even more styles of reading, as even the previously discussed Sumerian cuneiform, like Chinese and Japanese, started with a vertical right to left reading, but later on also developed a left to right horizontal reading, similar to modern English reading, both of which actually seem to have coexisted for a bit, until they stopped using cuneiform altogether. And I'll not go into the Bustophedon, which involves changing the order at each line for maximum reading speed. In any case, depending on the different origin of a language and culture we live in, we tend to visualize things like art, signs, and the world around us differently. Usually people who were raised with the English language, for example, would read these situations from a top left to bottom right, and that is what usually it is designed around. Even the page you're watching this video on, if it is YouTube in around the year 2023, usually starts on the top left with a little website logo, and it kind of trickles down to less important things, like my like and subscribe button, which now even has a bell. In other language spaces though, as we mentioned before, the order can be a bit different. One way this is very apparent it is with comics. Western style drawn stories tend to follow the aforementioned English order, while ones from Japan follow the opposite order. As a side note, manhwa are also in the English order though. So whenever an author is drawing the pages, they have to think about the flow of the eye reading alongside the other elements of action, composition and narrative. From a Western point of view, a small leap of mental gymnastics is obviously following an order opposite to what is taught and reinforced constantly, but that is easily surpassed. What is interesting to consider now is also how when we translate the vertically written Japanese into English, there's an element of disturbance in the reading flow, as now the English is more of a zigzag pause in the flow, which is a thing that was kind of trying to be prevented in earlier versions of manga adaptation in Italy, where they would like mirror horizontally the pages to match the direction of the written language and makes it more in line with the rest of the comics sold at the time, as we discussed earlier. It made sense in some places, but it generally felt weird, even compositionally. In any case, this specific topic in this micro environment is perfect to exemplify what I want to talk about today: paintings. Just like the reading of text, painting can have a specific order in which the figure of scene it wants to represent is more or less supposed to be encouraged to be looked at with. For some, it may come as a surprise that paintings can have an order, be it even a narrative. But just as songs, design, clothing and room arrangement do tell a story, even figurative art does so. And many times it is through iconography, which is attributes or references related to a visual symbolical element. One example I used in an earlier video is the peacock imagery in Bayonetta 1 and 2. You know, the good ones. In which this particular bird and its plumage, in Italian Renaissance symbology, is associated with purity and immortality, death and rebirth, which befits the religiosity of a character that wears and has wings based on it, Father Boulder of the Order of Laguna. Moreover, the peacock can assume a secondary darker element of vanity. Considering it alone, it's a neat reading, but if you consider the grand scheme of a narrative and lore of a game, which aims to showcase the many layers of culture and religious organizations, having the seemingly idyllic religious town of Vigrid in truth being a base of a fundamentalist religious regime that harvests people as sacrifice, and the angels with their angelic marmoreal exterior that hides the monstrous flesh of alienoid creatures, or even Jeanne that during the narrative acts like an antagonist to Bayonetta but is actually more of an ally to her in the end, making her remember who she was, striving and lying to the angels to see Bayonetta succeed, or at least that's what I like to read in the first one. The second one kind of goes for like a sort of revealing second natures of things, you know. Yeah, you know. Anyway, all of this is to say you can read paintings. And I'll show you how reading paintings can improve your appreciations of some of them, or at least how I do it. I don't know. In the Western world, as we said and knew already, we tend to read from the left to right. So naturally our paintings will be influenced by that idea, even just to the basic element of left being the evil side. An example that illustrates this is the painting of La Flagellazione di Cristo of Piero della Francesca, in which we have a perspective shot of Jesus being flogged while people go on their daily lives, visualized by going left to right, with the room where the flogging is happening on the left and then eyes move on the right with people just hanging out, just they don't care. Another is La Nascita di Venere by Botticelli, where we see the Greek goddess Aphrodite is born from the sea. And in the painting we see from the left two incarnated winds, in Italian called Zefiro and Aura, blowing a fresh and bountiful wind towards the goddess, which travels to the right of the painting and moving the cloak that one of the Aure, which are one of the many daughters of Zeus, she's bringing this cloak to the goddess. So while this painting has movement that goes from left to right, with a wind effect, all the characters are facing and supporting the Greek goddess Venus, who in this painting is presented in a Christ-like manner. So in a way, while we start on the left side and scan the paintings towards right, our full attention in the end come back to the main focus of the scene, which is the goddess Venus. This compositional technique was used many times in Christian paintings. Some famous examples are Il Giudizio Universale by Michelangelo, where every single glance is towards Jesus, who is like disgusted by humanity, or like the numerous depositions of Christ, which if you've seen any other videos on the channel talking about Italian stuff, it is a thing that gets discussed a lot here. It is unavoidable. So going in the opposite direction literally, we have Japanese writing. So by extension, even the painting art and comic art will do the same. One famous example would be found in one of my favorite paintings by Katsushika Hokusai, The Great Wave of Kanagawa, part of the 36 Views of Mount Fuji collection. Influenced by both Japanese, Chinese and also European styles, which include the use of perspective, this is one of the most famous Japanese painting ever, and for good reasons. It's good. I would like, if you mind, to read you the contents of a painting with its intended more or less reading order, so as to reveal its tempestuous nature. By the way, I'm not saying my reading is absolute, like don't worry if you see your cousin Ryan in this painting. By starting on the right, one of the first things that catches our eye are the fishermen and the sea. All the ships are visually engulfed by the sea, like we see only half of them. And moving along the paintings, we have an angular wave that is opposing one of these ships. And behind it, we see one of the ships being almost devoured by the crashing waves. We are then thrown against what we could call a jump scare of a wave, are cyclopic manifestations of the fury of the sea, its crests indenting themselves like claws and fangs, now bare. All of this then returns to the focus of the collection, the great Mount Fuji, now seemingly small in comparison to the wave, far, like the land is for these fishermen. A true banger. The Great Wave of Kanagawa, which is not exactly its true name, is a painting that represents the danger and beauty of nature at its most raw point, and humanity's compared smallness, but great determination to fight it. Its Japanese name, Kanagawa Oki Namura, translates to under the wave of Kanagawa. So the point is the wave being under it. You know? Edmond de Courcourt writes on the wave.
Drawing board that was supposed to have been called the Wave. It is much like that almost defied drawing, by a painter gripped by religious terror for a formidable sea that surrounds his country. A drawing that shows the angry ascent into the sky, the deep azure of the curl's transparent interior, the terror of its crest that scatters in a shadow of droplets in the form of the animal's claws.
This was not the first, nor the last wave painting that Hokusai made in his career. A later wave painting he did in his life, Kaiju no Fuji, like just Fuji at sea, again represents a scene of the stormy waves and the Great Mountain. But as you probably have already noticed, the direction of the wave is different. Its presence is different. The giant wave that obscured the mountain, while still being in movement, is now seemingly more gentle, more harmonious. Between its crests, you can see a flock of birds, plovers referred to as the Chidori, who dive into sea between the waves for food, which created the myth that they were born from the sea foam and the wave crest themselves, creating what is usually named the Nami Chidori iconography. In this painting, the crest of the waves assume a delicate quality, almost mixing with a flock that gently passes over the seas and almost seemingly flying on top of mountains. A different type of vision of harmony. Not gonna lie, this is also very good. I really like it. Let's go! In history and nature, the case of beings being left-handed is nothing new, as we have left-handed people now as there were in the past. And even in animals, the phenomenon is present, as even whales can be a thing that corresponds to left-handedness, like they spin on different directions or something like that. Ignoring how the presence of left-handed people can be more or less numerous in certain areas in the world, on average the left-handed population has kind of always been smaller. This has brought some cultures to see left-handedness as a sort of genetic defect that had to be corrected or even punished. In the West especially, left-handed people were considered demonic in nature at certain points, and the correction of it has kind of permeated our world up to relatively very recently. Like, the words for left in Italian and sinister are sinistra, like basically the same word, which both derive from the Latin word sinus, which is also the word from which breast, which is seno, derives in Italian. And it means hidden beneath the garments, as the Roman clothing style hid the left side and also the breast, since it was like considered the weak and negative side, like the left one. By the way, the reason why the left, as in the political ideology, is called the left, kinda derives from the French Revolution period, during which, in the parliament, most of the pro-republic votants sat, while the pro-monarchy people sat on the right. And it kind of just stuck, this thing. And even in Indian adjacent cultures, it seems that the right hand is the one used for clean activities like eating, while the left is more dedicated to like cleaning your body or, you know, after you go to the bathroom. So in the research phase of this video, I found discussions online about character framing and positioning in Japanese media, and specifically the animated series Yugioh. In the series, whenever a duel between two characters will happen, the main or good characters will usually be on the right side of the screen, while the antagonist, or like the more evil of the two antagonists if they fight each other, they stand on the left. Just as the reading order from paintings we discussed earlier, in Japan people tend to read from right to left, so having the characters that we should be emphasizing with be on the side that we start on kinda makes sense, directionally, so that the antagonist's presence in the scene is more striking, like as the final point of the hypothetical arrow, you know, since they counter the direction you're looking from. This kind of manifested a lot in Kabuki. where the movement of a scene follows this same movement order, as the scene needs to be clear so the public can follow the plot more easily. By the way, for this research as well, I fell into a deep rabbit hole about Kabuki. It's really cool though, like
a sexy villain.
It's nice. There's a video series called like Kabuki Cool you can check out to learn some things about it. Like everything else, I'll add it to the description. Anyway, evolving from this, I wanted to check out how this type of thought process, where the left is evil, and went into video games. Here, more than ever, clarity is fundamental, as there is an aspect of the player needing to know where the character is and everything related to them. So like RPGs from Japan tend to have this kind of framing for battles. So the player character is on the right and the opponent is on the left. And although Pokemon seems to be an exception at first, as the battle goes in the other direction, one has to remember that the player and the opponent appear sliding from the side, so it's actually following this idea more than ever, even more than some others. Fighting games usually put player 1 on the left. In most cases I'm not sure how it would signify something, but in Samurai Showdown when fighting, Senryo Kyoshiro, who is a Kabuki actor, appears on the right, and so we appear on the left as his opponent. So in the sense, for his show, because we are on the stage, we are the antagonist. And in general, as the fighting games, we are the antagonist, because if you think about it, we are challenging the other character. Like the theme that plays in the background is not your theme, it's the other character's theme. Aerial shoot games, like the shoot 'em ups, shooty shoot man, in a lot of cases, if not going from bottom to top, tend to go towards the right. I have potentially two theories on the matter, as one, it could have been influenced by an older Western flight game, or even two, it could have been made to account for the direction of the screen interlacing, as VCR screens tend to have a directional bias, as one may call it, like the screen like gets updated going left to right. Honestly, I'm not an expert in neither flight shooties or interlacing. I hope I didn't explain things poorly here. Up until recently with Breath of the Wild, the main character of the Legend of Zelda series, Link, has been depicted in most games as left-handed. This element of his design kind of aided his passage to 3D, as his figure having its back to us with the sword on the left naturally fits well with the framing of him on the right and his opponents on the left. Not sure if it is intentional though, I'm probably going to insane as I'm writing this at 3 AM. One series that went in a different approach is Resident Evil, as when it went with an over-the-shoulder camera, the framing went in what we might call Western framing, so with enemies on your right and such, as most of the gameplay is relevant to Leon's right hand, with his knife, with his gun, you know. So yeah, I hope this directionist ramble, ironically about direction in language, has made you appreciate some things you might not have thought about initially about some things. Or like if you learned something, I hope. Well, I hope you have a nice rest of your day, and yeah, bye. I'll see you soon. I'll try to be sooner this time. Yeah, bye.